I have to be honest with you. When I first saw the title of the manuscript we're covering today, Empowering Youth for a Global Heart, I uh I kind of groaned.
Oh, really? Why's that?
Well, it just sounds like it's going to be another one of those, logistical manuals.
How-to guides.
Yes.
Yeah,
Here's how you organize a bake sale. Here's how you pack a suitcase for a mission trip. I was just expecting spreadsheets and like safety protocol.
all the administrative stuff.
Exactly. But then I started reading the introduction and I had this one statement that just stopped me cold. It completely threw my assumptions out the window.
Let me guess, it was the part about the crisis.
Yes. The source makes this incredibly bold claim. It says the greatest leadership crisis of our generation. It isn't a lack of talent. It's not a lack of passion. It's not even a lack of money.
Which is what everyone always says the problem is.
Right. That's
No.
always the number one complaint. But this text argues the real crisis is a lack of global vision formed early enough to matter.
It's a provocative opening, isn't it?
Right. It's basically saying we have all the hardware, the people, the resources, but we haven't installed the operating system.
That is a perfect analogy, and that's really the mission of this deep dive. We're unpacking a manuscript that argues we're failing to move young people from a vague interest in social causes to a deep, sustainable, missional identity.
And we really need to define that problem clearly first. Because the source points out something about Gen Z that it feels so true. It says they are connected to everything.
But informed about almost nothing deeply.
Exactly. It's the paradox of the digital age, right?
Yeah.
Think about the average teenager's social media feed.
Oh, yeah. You see a headline about a famine, then a dance video, then a war update, then a meme. It's instantaneous whiplash.
It's emotional overload with zero context.
Precisely. They have incredible passion for things like climate change or racial justice, but they lack a framework to process it all.
Yeah.
The source calls it compassion fatigue, just waiting to happen.
That makes so much sense. It's like revving an engine in neutral. You make a lot of noise, you burn a lot of fuel, but you don't actually go anywhere.
And you eventually blow the engine. Which is why the central argument here is that global mission can't just be an extracurricular. It can be a trip you take.
It has to be an identity.
It has to be an identity. The goal isn't just to mobilize youth to do things, it's to form them into sent people.
Sent people. Okay, let's just pause on that for a second, because that sounds nice, but what does it actually mean? It feels a little abstract.
It does, until you dig into the theology behind it. The text brings up a Latin term here, missio Dei.
Okay, lay it on me. I know missio is mission, but...
It means the mission of God. And this is a massive paradigm shift. Most of us think of missions as like a department in a church.
A committee, the one that meets in the basement on Tuesdays.
Exactly. It's a program. It's something we do for God. But Missio Dei flips that. It says mission isn't something the church does, it's who God is. Well, the text lays out this flow. The Father sends the Son sends the Spirit. God is, by his very nature, a sending God, always reaching outward.
So if I'm following that logic, then being sent isn't a job description we take on. It's what part of our DNA.
You've got it. You don't sign up for mission, you're created for it. And the source argues that identity precedes activity. You have to know who you are before what you do really matters.
Okay, but hold on. I have to push back a little there. Doesn't doing help you figure out being? I mean, can't a young person go on a trip and through that activity find their identity?
That's a fair question. And the text isn't saying, don't do anything, but it's warning about the order of operations. If you start with activity without that identity foundation, you risk falling into what it calls consumer Christianity.
Which is
the what's in it for me mindset. I volunteer because it looks good on my college application. I go on the trip because I want the cool photos for my Instagram.
It's transactional.
Exactly. Versus being a sent disciple, which is about who you are for the world. The text used the example of ancient Israel. They were chosen not for privilege, but to be a conduit of blessing to all nations.
So the blessing wasn't supposed to stop with them?
Never. Belonging comes before going, but belonging is always for the sake of going.
Okay, so we have this concept of identity, I am sent, but the source is very specific about the timing. It argues that adolescence, high school, early college, that's the critical window. Why the rush?
You can figure it out later, but it's much harder. The text calls these years the wet cement phase of life. If you don't integrate this sent identity now, mission just becomes a hobby later on, something you do on the weekends, not the lens through which you see your entire life.
And you end up with adults who maybe they write a check, but they don't actually live differently.
Exactly. You end up with donors, not disciples.
All right, so let's get practical. You're a mentor, a parent. You have a teenager who is, like you said, scrolling through TikTok, seeing the world fall apart. How do you actually form this identity? You can't just lecture them about Missio Dei.
No, you're right. Lectures don't work. The manuscript moves into a section on mentorship that I found really, really challenging. It contrasts managerial leadership with spiritual parenting.
I highlighted that section too, and honestly, it felt like a bit of a personal attack.
Oh, yeah.
Because managerial leadership, efficiency, checking boxes, making sure the job gets done, that's how the world works.
Right. It's how businesses run.
But the text argues that when you are forming a human being, that managerial mindset is, well, toxic. It focuses on output. Did you paint the wall? Did you hand out the flyers?
It treats the young person like an employee.
So what does spiritual parenting look like then? Is it just being nicer?
It's much deeper than that. The source uses the relationship between Paul and Timothy as the case study. Paul wasn't just Timothy's boss. He interpreted Timothy's life for him. When Timothy was afraid, Paul didn't, put him on a performance improvement plan.
He didn't fire him for lack of confidence.
No. He reminded him of the gift inside him. He fathered him. But here's the most important part, and the text really emphasizes this. Paul was vulnerable.
The tears and chains part.
Yes. Paul showed Timothy his scars. He showed him that faith doesn't mean everything goes smoothly or that you stop being afraid.
That is so rare. Most mentors feel this pressure to present a polished, I have it all figured out image.
And that creates distance. If you're perfect, I can admire you, but I can't imitate you. Paul showed Timothy how to suffer. There's a line in the text that says, the church does not suffer from a leadership shortage. It suffers from a spiritual parenting deficit.
Wow. That hits hard. We don't need more CEOs. We need mothers and fathers.
And it's about this life-to-life transmission. The source points to Teaching Timothy 2.2. It's like a genealogy. Paul teaches Timothy, who teaches faithful people, who then teach others.
4 generations in one verse.
And that chain only holds if the connection is relational. You can't download a sent identity from a podcast. You have to see it lived out.
Okay, so identity mentorship. Now, I want to tackle the geography of this because there's always this tension between local work and global work.
The here versus there debate.
Right. The idea that real mission only happens when you get a passport stamp. Volunteering at the local food bank is nice, but flying to another continent is mission. The source calls this a false dichotomy.
It absolutely is. And it does something really interesting with Acts 1.8. You know the verse. You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth.
I've always heard that described like levels in a video game. You beat level 1 Jerusalem, then you unlock the next stage.
That's how everyone hears it.
Yeah.
But the source says that's linguistically wrong. It's not a checklist. It's a simultaneous calling. You're meant to be a witness in all those spheres at the same time.
But the text does argue that local service plays a specific role, right? It calls it the training ground.
Yes, and this is vital. You cannot be globally effective if you are locally disengaged. The text shares the story of a high school student named Maria.
Right, the food pantry.
She wanted to change the world, but her mentor started her off volunteering at a food pantry in her own neighborhood.
Yeah.
And honestly, she was bored.
She wanted to be a hero, and she was stuck organizing cans of beans.
It felt small.
Hmm.
But her mentor, and this goes back to that spiritual parenting, helped her look closer. She started asking, why is food so expensive here? How does this connect to migrant labor?
She started seeing the systems behind the problem.
Exactly. She connected local hunger to global economics. So years later, when she did go on an international trip, she wasn't a tourist taking selfies. She went as a prepared servant who understood the complexity of poverty.
Because she had done the homework at home.
Precisely. And you can contrast that with the other story, Elena, the university student.
Yeah.
She wanted to launch a nonprofit, go overseas immediately.
And her mentor told her to just practice faithful presence in her dorm.
Can you imagine? He told her to engage with international students on her own campus. The lesson was cross-cultural patience. If you can't love the person next door who cooks food that smells different, a plane ticket isn't going to magically fix your heart.
That phrase from the text, depth not distance, is really sticking with me.
It completely debunks the glamour of it all. It says the hardest work is often the unseen work right in front of your face.
Which brings us to sustainability. Because the work is exhausting. The world is broken. And the source has a pretty stark warning here. Zeal without formation eventually exhausts the soul.
That is the sentence of the book for me. Young people burn out because their output exceeds their input. They're giving out more energy than they are taking in.
So how do we stop the crash? The text introduces this idea of rule of life. And again, rule sounds so restrictive.
It does, but it comes from the Latin word regula, which means a trellis, like for a grapevine.
Oh, I love that imagery.
The vine wants to grow, right? But without a trellis, it just crawls in the mud and gets trampled. The trellis lifts it up so it can actually bear fruit. It's not about legalism, it's about support.
So what are the slats on this trellis? What actually supports a young person?
The text points to a few key practices. One is scripture, but reading it as a mission story, not just a rule book. Another is prayer, specifically intercession.
It mentions something called prayer mapping. What is that?
It's actually a really dynamic practice. You take a map, identify specific unreached people groups or conflict zones, you learn about their reality, and you pray specifically for them. It expands your heart to the size of the world, even from your bedroom.
And then there's the one that I think is the hardest for our culture today. Rest.
The most countercultural discipline of them all.
And the text frames rest as a theological statement. It's not just about recharging your battery so you can work more.
It is. Rest is the discipline of stopping to acknowledge, I am not the Messiah. That is crucial. If you think the mission depends entirely on you, you will burn out. Rest is an act of trust. It's saying, God, the world is yours. I'm going to sleep.
That takes a lot of humility. And it seems like you can't do that alone. The source brings up community accountability as a safety net.
Mission is never solo. The story of Raphael was a great example. This charismatic, gifted guy, but his small group didn't just cheer him on.
They called him out.
They questioned his motives. They saw he was doing things for approval, not for service. That kind of grace-filled correction in a safe space saved him from a public crisis down the road.
It's amazing how all these pieces, identity, mentorship, local grounding, rest, they all lean on community. Which brings us to the final piece, the sending church.
This is where the rubber meets the road for leaders listening. The text really critiques churches that send without sustaining.
They called it shedding, right? Like, good luck, send a postcard.
Exactly. Here's a check, see you in a few years. The vision here is the church as a training ecosystem, not an event center. It should be a launching pad and a living anchor.
I really struggled with that paradox the source mentioned. The church grows strongest not by holding people tightly, but by sending them faithfully.
It's the opposite of a hoarding mentality.
But that's scary for a leader. You pour all this time and energy into these bright young people, and then the goal is to send them away.
It feels like a loss if your metric is just butts and seats. But if you try to keep your best talent just to run your own machine, you might have a big organization, but you lose the actual mission.
So it requires a total redefinition of success.
It does. The text talks about the economy of God, where unseen faithfulness matters more than visible results. We have to celebrate the goers just as much as the stayers.
It reminds me of that concept of long obedience. We live in a world of instant viral fame. This is talking about decades of unseen, faithful work.
And that is the hard sell for young people today. Come and die to yourself, do hard work, maybe no one will ever know your name. But the promise is that this is the only path to a life that is actually life.
So let's bring this all together. We started with the crisis, not of resources, but of formation. We talked about shifting from doing to being. We looked at spiritual parents, local training, and the trellis we need to keep from collapsing.
It really is a comprehensive roadmap. It takes the raw energy of youth and gives it a structure that can actually sustain a lifetime of impact.
And the why behind all of it. Why go through all this trouble?
Because we aren't just trying to make kids into good citizens. We're trying to align them with God's redemptive imagination for the entire world. To see the world as broken, yes, but also beloved and redeemable.
That is a beautiful vision. Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought from the source that it really challenged me.
I think I know the one. It flips the script entirely.
It says, the question isn't whether the next generation is capable of carrying this global vision. We know they are. The real question is whether the current generation of leaders is willing to walk slowly enough to form them, mentor them, and entrust the mission to them before the opportunity passes.
That is the challenge.
Yeah.
Are we willing to slow down to build a trellis? Or are we too busy trying to harvest the fruit?
Something to chew on, for sure. Thanks for walking through this with me today.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.